My name's Jake. I make knives and shifters. I've been smithing for 5 years. I learned blacksmithing from YouTube primarily, and then also just from talking to people on Instagram, asking questions, trial and error. The primary materials that I use are steel and wood and composites, and I break those down. The steel I use is either high carbon or stainless. If it's stainless, I can't heat treat it in-house. I have to send it out to be heat treated because the process is more complex. With the high carbon steels, which are primarily 1095 and 1080, those I can heat treat in-house in my forge. The primary tools that I use is a belt grinder, 2x72. So the belt's 2 inches wide and 72 inches long. I partially built myself. Basically I bought a frame, and then I attached a 2 horsepower motor to it, and then I wired that to a variable frequency drive, which allows me to control the speed. I have a 50-pound vise that's pretty essential, and then I have a propane forge, a single burner, not super big, but it does the job. Okay, so I only have one hammer, actually kind of expensive hammer. I splurged a little bit, but honestly it doesn't matter what hammer you use. I just wanted something that was going to work. So it's a cross peen hammer, so it just has a flat semi-rounded face in the front, and then it has a slightly smaller, about maybe half inch to 3/4 inch round on the back, and that's so you can kind of isolate how you're hitting the steel. You put more power into it. And then I have a couple of different kinds of tongs, but mainly just flat jaw tongs, because I mostly weld rebar onto the knife so I can hold it for the most part. And that's pretty much it for tools. My startup process involves first sketching the knife. So I'll use rulers and pencils to dial in the shape exactly how I want it, according to the customer specifications. So the different methods that I use when I begin a knife, I can either start from a mono steel, which is what I mentioned before, 1095, 1084 carbon steel, and then either stainless steel. Those you can just go straight into forging. There's also Damascus, and that's or more accurately referred to as pattern welding, which is where you take 2 alternate types of steel and weld them together, or actually forge weld them together at really high temperatures, around 2300 degrees-ish. It's actually right before the steels melt, so they kind of almost melt together, and then you can actually manipulate that pattern as you wish, and then once you get that pattern that you desire, then it can be forged into a knife. So the different stages of knife making is, there's different ways you can do it, but with primarily blacksmithing, you're going to start out by forging, obviously. So you're going to try and get as close as you possibly can to the finished shape of the knife, and then from there you'll go to grinding on the belt grinder, and that's where a lot of refinement happens. It doesn't get too refined. There's kind of a rough stage of grinding. And then it gets quenched and heat treated, and then it'll go into the more refined stage of grinding with a lot finer grit belt, and then it'll go to the hand finishing stage, where it's all sandpaper and all done by hand, and then after that, if it needs even more polished of a finish, it'll go to the variable speed buffer that I have. The handles, I usually start with just like a regular size, around 2-inch wide by 5-inch long block of wood or composite, depending on what I'm doing. I can also start from a log. People have sent me wood from their backyards before, I send it off to get stabilized, which is the process of infusing the wood with resin. It makes it less likely to crack. It can handle the elements a lot better, abuse, etc. My name's Jake, and I own JR Palm Blacksmithing.